thoughtful. In every age, value is more than numbers. It is a mirror of the human soul. When Karl Marx died in March of 1883, only 11 people attended his funeral. A bitter wind swept through Highgate Cemetery as Friedrich Engels stood beside a simple grave and whispered, "His name will endure through the ages." Few believed it then. Within a generation, the world would. From that grave, his words began to move faster than armies. Translated, reprinted, and reinterpreted, Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto became something he never intended: scripture. Students studied them as revelation. Revolutionaries read them as instruction. The man who had called religion the opium of the people became the prophet of a new faith. Across the industrial world, workers organized under red banners. In the streets of Paris, they sang of solidarity. In St. Petersburg, whispers of revolution filled the factories. Even in distant Asia, his words crossed oceans. Workers of all lands unite became both a prayer and a threat. And where Marx had written about theory, others began to write about power. But something shifted in translation. The philosophy of liberation became a politics of control. The dialectic, that dance of contradictions, hardened into doctrine. Marx's living theory, meant to evolve, was embalmed by disciples who needed certainty more than truth. In Russia, Lenin read Kapital not as diagnosis, but as destiny. The revolution would come, if not naturally, then by force. In 1917, the prophecy seemed fulfilled. The Tsar fell, the workers seized power. A century's chain snapped in a single October night. The red flag rose, not over a pamphlet, but a nation. Yet even then, the ghost of Marx stirred uneasily. He had written of emancipation. They built an empire. He had imagined the withering away of the state. They built one of iron. The revolution devoured its own children. In the name of equality, fear became policy. In the name of progress, millions labored and starved in silence. Marx had dissected exploitation, others institutionalized it anew. The machinery of alienation he once condemned found a new engine: ideology. And yet, beneath the shadow, his original fire endured. In the 1930s, as markets collapsed and breadlines lengthened, even his critics reopened Kapital. They found in his analysis not prophecy, but pattern, a map of crisis repeating itself. When speculation replaces substance, when debt feeds growth, when the few consume the future, the system trembles. He had seen the rhythm long before we named it the business cycle. To understand Marx, one must separate the thinker from the flag. His project was not tyranny, it was truth-seeking. He asked how freedom could coexist with necessity, how creativity could survive in a world ruled by exchange. His enemy was not wealth but worship, the idolatry of capital. He believed that every economic system eventually becomes a moral system, defining what counts as good, what counts as human. Men make their own history, he wrote, but they do not make it as they please. That sentence may be his most enduring. It captures the tragic balance between agency and structure, between what we wish to build and what the world allows. It is the humility behind his fury, that no revolution can escape the material conditions that birthed it. The 20th century would test that truth in blood and fire. The hammer and sickle flew over Moscow, Beijing, Havana, and Hanoi. Empires fell, new ones rose. Some invoked Marx to justify justice, others to silence it. His ideas fed both liberation movements and totalitarian regimes. They freed nations and imprisoned minds. To blame him for everything done in his name is to mistake diagnosis for disease. Yet to absolve him entirely is to ignore the moral risk of ideas too certain. For every thinker must ask, what becomes of truth when it leaves the page and meets power? Gulags or the purges, but he knew the danger of any creed that believes itself absolute. Critique, he once said, must not fear its own results. He would have demanded that of his followers, if they had listened. As the century turned, the tide shifted again. Capitalism, wounded but unbroken, reasserted itself. The Berlin Wall fell, the markets rose. Pundits declared the end of history. But history does not end, it circles. Each crisis revives the same question Marx asked in London's fog. Why do wealth and insecurity grow together? Why does progress feel hollow? Why does work, meant to dignify, so often deplete? The digital age gave the old paradox new clothes. Data replaced steel, attention replaced labor. Yet the logic was the same. Platforms extracted time as factories once extracted sweat. The product, the self, became the commodity. Marx's alienation returned, glowing behind screens. And still his ghost refuses dogma. He invites not belief but reflection. He forces us to see the moral dimension of markets, to ask not only how much, but why. His true legacy is not the revolution that claimed his name, but the conscience that refused to die with it. To study Marx today is not to join a party, but to join a question. What kind of world do we build when efficiency becomes virtue? When success is measured by speed, not substance? When growth continues though purpose has stopped? These are not partisan questions, they are human ones. In his final years, nearly blind, Marx wrote one last note to himself. Doubt everything. It was both confession and commandment. Doubt is the soul of philosophy and the antidote to fanaticism. He feared not disagreement, but stagnation. He knew that even the purest ideals rot when they forget to ask why. Engels kept his promise. He edited the later volumes of Kapital, preserved the manuscripts, and spread the words of his friend across continents. When he died in 1895, he asked that his ashes be scattered into the sea, to drift as ideas do, without borders. And so the story of Marx is not one of saints or villains, it is the story of conscience meeting complexity, of a man who believed that thought could redeem suffering, that logic could expose injustice, that truth could, one day, be useful. His work reminds us that every economy hides an ethic, and every price a choice. To read him now is to hold a mirror to our own time. The inequality of data, the speed of capital, the exhaustion of meaning. The machinery has changed, but the soul it tests is the same. His challenge endures, to make systems serve people, not people serve systems. Philosophy, he once said, should be written with the blood of reality. And so he wrote, not from comfort but conviction. His words still echo because the struggle between power and dignity has no final chapter. Perhaps that is the truest measure of an idea, not that it triumphs, but that it survives interrogation. Not that it conquers, but that it continues to make us think. In that sense, Marx's greatest revolution was not political, it was moral. This is Masters of Value, the echo of ideas that built our world. Next time, we begin a new journey, from revolution to reason. Friedrich Hayek and the architecture of freedom. Where Marx saw control as salvation, Hayek saw it as the path to tyranny. Two minds, one question: can freedom survive its own planners?